Stefan, thank you very much indeed for your analysis. Stefan Grober, our Washington correspondent there. If I can turn now to Kristine Berzina from the German Marshall Fund, who's with me in the studio here in Brussels. Kristine, we were watching the inaugural address by Trump together. You standing here in Brussels, Stefan was on the other side of the Atlantic. What did you take from it? What do you really think is going to be the impact on Europe of a Trump presidency?
I think that is a question that everyone in Europe, in Brussels in particular, wants to answer. What is President Trump now going to say about Europe? How will he address Europe specifically? And what can we learn already from past interviews or even from the inaugural address to see what the policies might be in the coming 4 years? And even looking at the inaugural address, I think we see a few hints at what that might be. America first was a catchphrase there that he repeated twice. And there could be some wariness here in Brussels about the America First catchphrase, because within that, where do you have room for partners? Will there be an adversarial response to all other countries? Or is there a place still for trusted allies, for economic partners, for security partners? We'll see. And when you look deeper, there were 2 points specifically that are important for the transatlantic relationship that we saw in the inaugural address. One of them was this reluctance to enrich other countries' manufacturing sectors. And the second was a reluctance to subsidize the armies of other countries. The economic and security relationship between the US and Europe has been fundamental since the Marshall Plan and since the founding of the institution of NATO. And if that is going to be questioned, what does Europe and NATO do?
Because, of course, Kristine, Trump has made no secret of what he thinks about NATO. He was saying very recently that it's obsolete. I mean, is this really a big worry in the EU about what's going to happen to NATO now?
The future of NATO and the future of transatlantic relations is a big topic of conversation right now in Brussels. But I don't think that there is a cause to be panic-stricken about it. When you look at Trump's rhetoric and you look at the interviews he has given, even last weekend, to The Times and to Die Welt, he has a strong commitment to European security, but a concern over the way that a lot of the institutions are run and the way they are funded. This could be seen perhaps as an opportunity for these institutions to address new threats and what we see today. We have hybrid risks, we have cyber terrorism, disinformation, other things that perhaps we weren't thinking about 50 or more years ago. So right now, how does the EU and how does NATO look towards the threats of today? And how do leaders here in Brussels and across the European Union, how did they approach Washington and prove their interest and their value to the United States? The president talked about the need for America's interests to come first. How will he determine those interests? It has been cardinal to American foreign policy and to European foreign policy to have a strong transatlantic relationship. This supports the global challenges far and wide, including the fight against international terrorism. If Donald Trump is going to take this on, he is going to need partners, reliable partners with resources, with training. When he looks to Europe, he can find someone to call. He can find someone he can rely on in a way that will not be perhaps changed in 6 months, depending on political winds. There is reliability and steadiness, and he will need that.
Kristine, some of the big issues at the moment for the EU are Russia, Syria, Turkey. You recently spent 6 months in Russia, I believe. What are you expecting from the Trump presidency in terms of Russia, and what impact could that have on the decisions made here in Brussels?
President Trump has expressed interest in changing up the relationship with Russia. But this has also been true of all past U.S. presidents. In the recent past, we had a reset under President Obama. President Bush as well was interested in having more of a personal relationship with Vladimir Putin. So this is something that has been tried before. Perhaps the rhetoric is stronger right now than it has been yet. So we can perhaps see some changes. So short term, we look at sanctions policy, we look at the challenges in Syria, and I would imagine that the Trump administration would be reaching out more to Moscow than the Obama presidency has recently been doing.
But is it going to be more than this sort of strongman friendship? Is it going to translate into real action on the ground, do you think?
I think it depends on what they can come up with. And I think that, again, if we take American interests to include also security in the EU, which Donald Trump has said is important to him, then perhaps there are solutions if they integrate American interest, also including American interests in Europe. I think that we really have yet to see, because any kind of conversation between Washington and Moscow that takes place is going to have to play out, and it will be more than a single meeting and a single handshake.
We're awaiting lots of details, obviously, for the Trump presidency ahead. One EU diplomat here in Brussels recently said that dealing with Donald Trump, they've concluded that they're dealing with a big unknown. How far would you go along with that? I mean, what is the fear, what is the feeling here in Brussels amongst leaders, politicians, and all of those people making the decisions here?
Everybody is hanging on to every word and to every tweet from the president. At the same time, there is a lot of interest in the cabinet picks. When you look at American foreign policy, it is not simply a tweet. And I would be very surprised if American foreign policy was the to operationalize a tweet. Instead, it's going to be a process of consultation and discussion between the president and between his members of cabinet and their staffs. And when you look at the confirmation hearings from the past few weeks, whether it is with Rex Tillerson, who is the nominee to be Secretary of State, or with the Mattis, the potential Secretary of Defense, you do see a lot of the positions there being much more comfortable to the European policy establishment here. And so we'll see what happens. How do you put together a tweet and then the in-depth consultations that you would have with the cabinet?
Kristine, Trump, we don't really know what he's going to do in Europe in the future. We don't know the kind of relationship that he's going to have with Europe. But if Europe is more isolated, if America does go away more from Europe in the future, we can stand here and be pessimistic, other people out there being pessimistic in our questioning and debating all of these things. But do you think there's really an opportunity here for Europe as well? Because with Brexit and everything else, it's having a bit of a PR crisis at the moment, isn't it?
Europe is going to have to defend itself. I think that you can look at the recent interviews that Donald Trump gave and his general look across the Atlantic right now as a big question. Who are you and why do I care? What Europe has to do right now is stand up and say, this is who we are. We are your best partner. We are an economic partner. We are good at solving the world's problems together. And if you step away from that, that's going to hurt you. But we need leaders here on the European side who are brave enough and eloquent enough to go to Washington and to say that. I think they know what the challenge is, and I really hope that in the next few months we're going to see the stream of European politicians cross the Atlantic and start having those conversations in DC.
Kristine Berzina from the German Marshall Fund here in Brussels, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Plenty for Europe to think about as this new historic era of US politics gets underway. That's all from the team here in Brussels. Thanks for watching.